It had been years since my parents divorced, and the moment my father said, "I want you to meet someone," I felt my stomach twist. He had never spoken like that before, not since the loneliness settled into our house. We met at the old library on a Saturday afternoon. My father straightened his jacket nervously, his eyes brighter than I had seen them in a long time. "Her name is Serena," he told me, almost as if he were confessing a secret. "She is very special to me." I stood near the tall shelves when she walked in. She was taller than I expected, elegant, carrying a folder against her chest. Her presence shifted the room in an instant. She wore a dark blouse tucked into slim trousers, her hair swept back loosely, and when her eyes found mine it felt as though the noise of the hall fell away. "This must be your daughter," she said softly, her voice smooth, affectionate but cautious. She turned toward me with a hand extended. "Maya, right? I've heard so much about you." I nodded, forcing a polite smile. "Nice to meet you, Serena." Her handshake was strong, but her skin was warm, almost delicate. I pulled my hand back quickly, embarrassed by the heat rising in my cheeks. Then it happened. She bent to pick up a catalog that slipped from her folder. Her blouse shifted, and for a brief second the red of her bra showed beneath the fabric. It was nothing, just a glimpse, but my eyes caught it before I could look away. My pulse thudded painfully in my throat. My father, unaware, began telling Serena about the library's history. They spoke animatedly, his voice filled with joy I had not heard in years. I stood at his side, pretending to listen, though all I could feel was the sharp awareness of Serena's presence. Later, during her lecture on architecture and preservation, she spoke with clarity, each gesture precise. I tried to focus on her words, but my attention betrayed me, drifting to the way her hair caught the light, the curve of her mouth when she smiled. Every time her gaze brushed mine, I froze, unable to breathe. When the event ended, my father introduced her to friends, his pride obvious. I kept my distance until the three of us stepped outside into the cool air. Street lamps glowed against the cobblestones, and the sea wind carried the faint smell of salt. "Your father tells me you're an artist," Serena said, her tone light, almost teasing. I tightened my hold on the sketchbook under my arm. "I try." "I'd love to see your work someday," she replied. Her eyes lingered longer than necessary. My father was distracted by his phone. For a brief moment, Serena and I stood alone. She folded her arms and smiled. "He loves you very much. He talks about you constantly." I nodded, unable to think of what to say. Then she extended her hand again. "I'm glad we finally met." When I placed my hand in hers, the warmth of her touch lingered. Longer than a handshake should. Longer than I was ready to admit. That night, back in my room, I opened my sketchbook. Pages filled with shells, intertwined hands, colors that bled together. I tried to draw her profile, the way her eyes had searched mine, the glimpse of red fabric I could not forget. My pencil stopped halfway, the page too heavy with meaning. I whispered to myself what I already knew. She was my father's new girlfriend. And something had begun in me that I could not name, but it was already too late to deny. Serena's presence became part of the rhythm of the house before Maya had the chance to decide how she felt about it. Her father welcomed her often, sometimes with blueprints in hand, sometimes just for coffee. Every visit brought another shift, as if invisible threads were being woven through the rooms they had once known so well. Books were pushed aside for sketches. Tables were cleared for samples of wood and fabric. Serena moved with ease in each space, not as a guest, but as someone reshaping it with her ideas. Daniel thrived on her energy, speaking about renovations with a voice that sounded years younger. Maya watched from the background, half intrigued and half overwhelmed. She told herself it was only natural. Her father had found someone who gave him joy. She should be glad. But the truth was less simple. Every time Serena leaned over a plan, every time her voice dropped into thoughtful calm, Maya's attention betrayed her. One evening, Serena carried her notes upstairs, looking for a quiet corner to work. Maya had left her sketchbook on the desk in the studio, pages spread open. She had been sketching late into the night, pouring onto the paper things she dared not say aloud. Shells drawn half open, two hands entwined, streaks of orange and violet layered like a flag she had never spoken of but always carried inside. When Maya returned to the studio, Serena was standing at the desk. She had not touched the pages, only studied them where they lay. The candlelight caught the curve of her cheek, her eyes focused, unblinking. Maya froze at the door. Her heart climbed into her throat. "These are striking," Serena said quietly. She turned, her voice even, her expression unreadable. "You draw with honesty." Maya rushed forward, closing the book with sudden force. "They're just experiments." Serena tilted her head slightly, then offered a small smile. "Experiments can reveal more truth than finished work." The words clung to Maya long after she left. That night she lay awake, unable to decide whether she had been exposed or understood. Days passed, and the air between them thickened with unspoken awareness. At dinner, Serena would ask about Maya's favorite painters, about the colors she chose, about the way she captured shapes. The questions were gentle but precise, never careless. Daniel was delighted by their conversations, mistaking them for the bond of soon-to-be family. One evening, Daniel left to meet a colleague. Serena stayed behind to finish reviewing some notes. Rain began to fall, heavy against the windows. Maya gathered towels from the closet, walking toward the bathroom where steam rolled beneath the door. She hesitated, then knocked. "Come in," Serena's voice called, softened by water. Maya stepped inside. The room was filled with mist, the mirror fogged over. Serena stood wrapped in a robe, her hair wet, droplets sliding down her neck. She reached for the towel with a grateful smile. Perfect timing. Their hands touched. The fabric was between them, yet the brush of skin sent a sharp current through Maya's chest. She lingered a moment too long. Her gaze lowered against her will, following the path of water down the hollow of Serena's throat. Serena did not move away. She accepted the towel slowly, her eyes holding Maya's. The silence grew heavy. Finally, Maya stepped back, cheeks burning, mumbling something about needing to check the kitchen. She left quickly. The image of that moment burned deep. The next morning, the memory still lived under her skin. She tried to paint, but every line curved into Serena's silhouette. The frustration was unbearable. She tore the page from her pad and shoved it into a drawer, but even that did not free her. Later, while sorting through a stack of samples, Serena bent to pick up a pencil that had rolled across the floor. The motion shifted her blouse, and once again the crimson beneath appeared, just a fraction, just enough to remind Maya of everything she had tried to push aside. Her chest tightened, her breath caught. When Serena rose, their eyes met, and though no word was spoken, they both felt the weight of the glance. Daniel never noticed. He talked about colors and furniture, his excitement filling the room. Maya excused herself, heart racing, needing air. She stepped into the garden, clutching her arms, trying to steady herself. But even the cool night air could not calm her. She closed her eyes, and all she saw was the glisten of water on Serena's skin, the edge of red silk, the careful way Serena had closed her sketchbook. That weekend, Serena remained for dinner again. Daniel poured wine, laughing easily. Maya sat quietly, speaking little, her eyes betraying her whenever Serena laughed, whenever her fingers brushed the stem of her glass. When the dinner plates had been cleared, Maya gathered them quietly, carrying each one into the kitchen. The sound of porcelain against the sink was soft, almost timid, as if she wanted to avoid breaking the fragile mood that lingered after the meal. She felt Serena step in beside her, the presence so near that the faint brush of fabric against her arm made her breath catch. Their shoulders aligned, close enough that the warmth of body against body seemed louder than the rain drumming against the windows. As Maya reached for a dish, her hand collided with Serena's. It was nothing more than fingertips grazing, yet it was enough to still the air around them. Neither withdrew. For a suspended moment, the only sound was the storm outside, the hiss of water sliding down glass, the distant rumble of thunder. The silence between them thickened until words became almost impossible. "You don't have to help," Maya whispered. Her voice was barely more than a breath, uncertain, betraying the tremor in her chest. "I want to," Serena answered, her tone firm but gentle. Her hand lingered, not just a passing touch, but an intention left unspoken, holding there for a heartbeat longer than it should. Then slowly, reluctantly, she withdrew, leaving behind a trace of warmth that Maya carried like a secret flame. The fragile intimacy shattered when Daniel returned, his cheerful voice filling the kitchen as he spoke about a book he had stumbled upon earlier. Plates clattered, laughter returned, and the moment was folded away, invisible to anyone but them. Later that night, Maya sat alone in her room. The storm outside had grown restless, hammering at the windows, echoing the storm inside her chest. She opened her sketchbook with hands that trembled, pencil racing across the page in desperate strokes. She drew forms that twisted with longing, lines curving into the suggestion of bodies caught in tension. A throat arched back, a hand reaching, a flash of crimson hidden beneath dark folds of fabric. Every line was a confession she could not speak aloud. She stopped only when her grip faltered. Closing the book, she pressed it tightly to her chest as though it could contain her secrets. Her eyes lifted to the ceiling, listening to the rain. The storm outside had found its mirror in her own body, wild, consuming, impossible to silence. Serena was no longer just a presence drifting into their days, no longer simply her father's companion. She had become a shadow woven into every thought, a light exposing corners Maya had buried for years. It terrified her, yet it also drew her in with an intensity she could not resist. And though she repeated to herself that this was wrong, though she tried to force guilt to steady her, the truth was merciless. The boundary had already blurred. The path toward Serena was no longer just temptation. It was inevitability. By late afternoon, the storm rolled in heavy and sudden, clouds blackening the sky, swallowing what little sun remained. By evening, the heavens opened. Rain lashed against the coastline, the windows trembling beneath its weight. Daniel had left hours before for a conference in the city, promising he would not return until the next day. That left Maya alone with Serena. The older woman lingered in the house, bent over sheets of paper and scattered designs, reviewing the final details of the renovation. Plans were pinned down with drinking glasses, edges curling against the damp air. The lights faltered once, flickering like the pulse of a dying flame, then again, and finally gave out altogether. The house sank into darkness. The only sound was the storm raging outside, wind rattling the shutters, rain carving rivers down the glass. Maya's breath hitched, but she moved quickly. She struck matches, lit candles one by one, carrying their fragile glow through the rooms. Shadows stretched long across the walls, the flickering light casting the house in an intimacy that felt both haunting and magnetic. She entered the living room, a candle in her hand, and found Serena standing at the window. The outline of her figure was etched against the wild storm beyond, her posture tall, her head slightly tilted as if she were listening to the storm's voice. When Serena turned, her features softened in the golden light. "Looks like it's just us tonight," she said with a small, knowing smile. Maya placed the candle on the table, the flame catching her own face, making her eyes glisten in the half-dark. "It happens here sometimes," she answered quietly. "The old power lines along the coast can't always hold against the wind." The words felt ordinary, but underneath them beat something extraordinary, an awareness neither could dismiss. They settled in the living room, the storm pressing against the glass. Serena gathered her notes into a neat stack, then pushed them aside. She looked tired, her hair falling loose from its knot, dampened by the humidity. Maya sat opposite, hugging her knees, the silence between them filled with the pulse of the storm. Serena spoke first, her voice softer than usual. "Nights like this remind me of London. I lived there for years. The rain never ended." Maya tilted her head. "Did you like it?" "Not always," Serena admitted. "I was married then, to someone who believed silence was strength." We lived in the same house, but never truly spoke. Storms felt heavier in that kind of loneliness. Maya watched her carefully, surprised by the honesty. Serena rarely spoke about her past. "I'm sorry," Maya murmured. Serena shook her head. "Don't be. I left when I realized I deserved more than quiet resentment. I came back here to begin again." Maya hesitated, then spoke, her voice low. "When my parents divorced, I felt invisible. My father was buried in work, my mother gone. The house felt hollow. Drawing was the only thing that kept me breathing." Serena leaned forward, her eyes fixed on her. "That's why your art carries weight. It comes from truth." The compliment struck deeper than it should have. Maya's chest tightened, her hands trembling slightly where they rested on her knees. A sudden crash of thunder made the windows shake. Instinctively, Maya flinched. Serena reached out without thinking, her hand brushing against Maya's. The touch lingered, neither of them pulling away. The silence stretched, filled only by rain. Maya whispered, almost to herself, "Why does it feel like there's no air when you're in the room?" Serena's eyes softened. She did not answer, but the truth was already there in the space between them. Minutes passed. Maya shifted closer, drawn by a force she could not fight. She ended up beside Serena on the couch, their shoulders nearly touching. Serena let out a slow breath, then wrapped an arm around her, tentative but firm enough to feel protective. Maya leaned in, resting her head against Serena's chest. The steady rhythm of her heartbeat filled her ear. The scent of her skin, faint vanilla mixed with rain, wrapped around her senses. For the first time in years, Maya felt safe. Not as a daughter under a father's roof, not as a student chasing unfinished dreams, but as herself. The warmth of Serena's body grounded her, yet every nerve burned with awareness. Serena stroked her arm lightly, a gesture meant to soothe. Maya closed her eyes, exhaustion slipping over her. She tried to fight it, unwilling to lose the moment, but her body gave in. Within minutes, she drifted into sleep, curled against Serena as though it had always been her place. Serena remained still, holding her. Her gaze rested on the flickering candle, but her mind was far away. She should have moved, should have created distance, but she didn't. Instead, she allowed the girl to sleep in her arms, her own breath uneven, her thoughts tangled between guilt and a tenderness she could no longer deny. When Maya stirred, the storm had already softened. The candles had burned low, wax dripping in uneven rivers along their holders. She blinked, dazed, and only then realized where she lay. Her cheek rested against Serena's chest, her arm curled around her waist as though it had always belonged there. She stiffened. Serena glanced down, catching her startled gaze. Neither spoke. The rain outside was fading, yet inside the air felt charged and unrelenting. Maya shifted, trying to pull away, shame rising hot in her throat. Serena's fingers closed gently around her wrist. "It's all right," she whispered, voice almost inaudible. Maya's breath trembled. She wanted to ask why, wanted to know what this closeness meant, why Serena had allowed her to remain in her arms. But the words caught before they could leave her mouth. Instead, she murmured, "Thank you." Serena's smile was small, touched with sadness. "For what?" "For giving me a moment to forget," Maya admitted, her voice fragile. Serena brushed back a loose strand of her hair, her touch tender. "You don't have to hold the weight by yourself." The simple kindness pierced deeper than any embrace. Maya felt tears threaten, but refused to let them fall. She leaned back enough to see Serena clearly in the flicker of candlelight. In those steady eyes, she recognized something unspoken, dangerous, and undeniable. Longing. It terrified her, yet it loosened something inside her that had been locked for years. Before either of them could say more, Serena stood, breaking the fragile thread. "You need rest," she said softly. She gathered her papers in silence, sliding them into her bag. "I'll stay in the guest room tonight." Maya's lips parted, ready to stop her, but no sound came. She only watched as Serena disappeared down the hall, the candle's glow trailing with her, leaving the room in deepening shadows. Alone, Maya sat motionless on the couch, heart racing as though the storm still raged within her. She closed her eyes, clutching the memory of Serena's embrace. The warmth lingered on her skin. She pressed her wrist, feeling where Serena's hand had held her, as if the mark remained. Later, in her room, she opened her sketchbook with trembling hands. She drew quickly, almost frantically, her pencil shaping the outlines of two figures in the dim light, one leaning into the other, sheltered yet restless, bound by a secret no words could hold. The page became her confession, raw and undeniable. When she set the pencil down, she whispered into the silence. "I can't stop." The storm had passed, but inside her, something even stronger had begun. The storm had passed, but nothing inside Maya had settled. She woke the next morning with the memory of warmth still pressed into her skin. The house was quiet. Serena had left early, a note on the counter written in elegant handwriting. "Thank you for the company. I hope you slept well. Nothing more, nothing less." Simple, polite, as though the night before had never happened. But Maya knew better. The silence of that embrace had already carved itself into her. Her father returned that afternoon, cheerful and animated. He spoke of his conference, of colleagues, of Serena's brilliance in conversation. Maya nodded, pretending to listen, her mind replaying every moment in the candlelight. When he mentioned that Serena had suggested hosting a small gathering at the end of the week, Maya's chest tightened. The evening arrived quickly. Friends of her father came, colleagues from the university, neighbors from the town. The house filled with voices, laughter, the smell of food and wine. Maya moved among them politely, but her attention was elsewhere. She scanned the room until she saw her. Serena stood near the fireplace, speaking with a group, her posture relaxed, a glass of wine in her hand. She wore a dark dress that caught the light every time she shifted, fabric moving like water. Her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, and her smile seemed brighter than the lamps themselves. Maya's stomach twisted. She tried to avoid staring, but her gaze betrayed her again and again. She watched Serena laugh, tilt her head, touch someone's arm lightly in emphasis. Every gesture sent sparks through Maya's chest. Later in the evening, the crowd thinned. Daniel was busy with guests in the dining room. Maya stepped outside onto the balcony, needing air. The night was cool, the town below glowing with scattered lights. The ocean murmured in the distance, calm after the storm. She leaned on the railing, hoping the chill would quiet her thoughts. Footsteps behind her broke the silence. Serena stepped into the night, glass still in her hand. Too noisy inside, she asked gently. Maya nodded. "I needed a moment." Serena joined her at the railing, standing close but not touching. For a while they said nothing, listening to the distant sounds of laughter drifting through the open doors. Maya spoke first. "You looked lost in thought earlier." "By the fireplace." Serena smiled faintly. "Crowds exhaust me sometimes. Easier to stand still and let the noise pass." Maya turned toward her. "That's how I feel most of the time." Their eyes met. The conversation stopped there, but the silence was louder than any words. Maya shifted closer, drawn as if pulled by gravity. She felt the warmth of Serena's body even with the space between them. She should have stepped back, but her body betrayed her. She leaned closer until she could feel Serena's breath against her cheek. "Why does this feel inevitable?" Maya whispered. Serena's hand lifted slowly, almost hesitant, until her fingertips brushed Maya's face. The touch was gentle, almost reverent. Maya closed her eyes, her heart pounding, the world dissolving around them. Then Serena kissed her. At first it was soft, tentative, lips brushing lightly, almost a question. Maya froze, then melted into it, her hands rising to Serena's waist. The kiss deepened, growing urgent, months of silence breaking open in a single moment. Serena's hand cupped the back of her neck, pulling her closer, while Maya pressed against her, desperate, hungry. The taste of wine lingered on Serena's mouth, the scent of her hair filling Maya's senses. The kiss was both forbidden and freeing, guilt and relief tangled together. They pulled back only to breathe, foreheads resting together, gasps mingling in the night air. Maya whispered, "We shouldn't." Serena hushed her with another kiss, slower this time, lingering, savoring. Her hands slid along Maya's arms, leaving trails of fire in their wake. Maya's body trembled under the weight of it, yet she did not pull away. When they finally stopped, both were breathless. Serena looked at her, eyes clouded with guilt and desire. "This is dangerous," Serena murmured. "I know," Maya said. Her voice shook. "But it feels more real than anything else." The sound of laughter inside reminded them of the world waiting beyond the balcony. They stepped apart reluctantly, trying to steady their breathing. Serena touched her cheek once more, a fleeting caress, then lowered her hand. "Your father," she whispered, as if reminding herself. Maya closed her eyes. "I can't pretend anymore." Serena turned away, staring out at the dark ocean. "Neither can I." They stood there, caught between the pull of desire and the weight of consequence. The night wrapped around them, hiding their secret even as it threatened to consume them. When the gathering ended, they avoided each other in the final moments. Guests left, Daniel thanked everyone, the house emptied. Maya slipped upstairs quickly, afraid of what her face might reveal. But in her room, she could still feel the press of Serena's lips, the heat of her touch, the sound of her whisper. She opened her sketchbook with trembling hands and drew again, lines frantic and raw, trying to capture the moment before it faded. She drew the curve of a mouth, the tilt of a head, the shadow of two figures leaning together under starlight. Her pencil broke under the force of her hand. She tossed it aside, clutching the page as though it were evidence of a crime. She whispered into the empty room, "It happened." And she knew nothing in her world would ever be the same. The night of the balcony kiss did not end when the last guest left. It carried itself into Maya's dreams, into the way she woke the next morning, into the way her hands shook when she poured coffee. She moved around her room with restless energy, unable to silence the memory of Serena's lips pressed against hers. The taste of wine still lingered, the warmth of touch refusing to fade. Daniel spent the day in town, leaving the house quiet. Serena arrived in the afternoon with a box of sketches under her arm. She greeted Daniel briefly, then slipped into the dining room to organize her work. Maya passed through with deliberate casualness, but her chest tightened when their eyes met. Nothing was said, yet the silence was louder than words. Later, when her father excused himself to answer a call, Maya found herself alone with her again. The house seemed to shrink, every wall pressing closer, every sound heightened. Serena placed her papers aside and looked at her with an expression that balanced caution and desire. "We can't," Serena whispered. Maya's voice shook. "We already did." The tension cracked. Serena crossed the space between them, her hand brushing Maya's arm. The touch was enough to shatter restraint. Their mouths met again, this time without hesitation. It was urgent, burning, as though they had been starving and finally allowed to taste. Maya's hands gripped Serena's waist, pulling her closer. Serena cupped her face, her fingers sliding into her hair. The kiss deepened, their breaths heavy, the room spinning around them. They broke apart only to breathe, then collided again, lips pressing harder, tongues meeting in a rhythm that felt both wild and inevitable. When they finally pulled away, Serena's forehead rested against hers. Their breaths mingled, hearts racing. "This will destroy everything," Serena said, her voice trembling. Maya closed her eyes. "Then let it." The words hung in the air, dangerous and intoxicating. That evening, Daniel suggested celebrating with dinner out. Maya declined, claiming exhaustion. Serena stayed behind to sort through her plans. Once Daniel left, the silence between them was unbearable. Maya paced the hall until she found herself at the guest room door. She knocked lightly. Serena opened, her expression torn between resistance and longing. "We should not," Serena said, but her body betrayed her, stepping aside to let Maya in. The room was dim, lit only by a single lamp. Papers covered the desk, but neither of them looked at them. Maya closed the door quietly. For a moment they stood still, the weight of choice pressing down. Then Maya moved first. She reached up, her lips finding Serena's. The kiss was soft at first, then deepened quickly, hunger overwhelming fear. Serena pulled her closer, hands sliding down her back, fingers gripping tight. They stumbled toward the bed, mouths never breaking. Serena lowered her gently, hovering above her, eyes dark with desire. Maya's breath came fast, her chest rising and falling, her hands tracing Serena's shoulders. Clothes shifted, buttons loosened, fabric falling away piece by piece. Skin pressed against skin, warm and trembling. Maya gasped as Serena's lips trailed along her neck, down to her collarbone, each kiss deliberate, searing. She arched into the touch, her hands tangled in Serena's hair, pulling her closer. The air was thick with heat, with the sound of whispered names and broken breaths. Serena's hands moved with care and hunger all at once, exploring, claiming, worshipping. Maya's body responded with urgency, her own hands roaming, her lips seeking Serena's again and again. They moved together with rhythm and fire, lost in the forbidden, consumed by the undeniable. Time dissolved. Nothing existed outside that room. When it ended, they lay tangled, bodies damp, breathing ragged. Maya rested her head against Serena's chest, listening to the steady beat of her heart. Serena stroked her hair gently, her touch tender after the storm of passion. For a while they said nothing. The silence was not empty. It was full of everything they had confessed without words. Finally, Serena spoke. Her voice was soft, heavy with conflict. "Your father loves you very much." Maya's throat tightened. She shifted slightly, looking up into Serena's eyes. "And so do I," Serena whispered. Her eyes shone, though no tears fell. The words hit Maya with the force of truth and guilt. She pressed closer, unwilling to let go, afraid of what tomorrow would bring. That night, she returned to her room after Daniel came home. She sat at her desk, her hands shaking, her lips swollen, her heart racing. She opened her sketchbook again, drawing feverishly, capturing fragments of what had just happened, the curve of a shoulder, the arc of two bodies intertwined, the heat of closeness translated into lines and colors. She stared at the page when it was done, her chest rising and falling. The drawing was proof, a confession, a memory she could never erase. The days that followed were a blur of stolen glances and carefully measured words. Serena continued her work with Daniel, her demeanor polite, professional, as though nothing had happened. But each time her eyes found Maya's, the truth burned behind them. At breakfast, Serena poured coffee with steady hands, while her foot brushed against Maya's beneath the table. In the garden, they stood side by side, careful not to touch, though the air between them trembled. One evening, as Daniel worked late, Serena lingered in the kitchen. Maya walked in quietly, stopping when their eyes met. The world stilled. Serena reached for her hand, squeezing gently. They kissed again, slow this time, tender, less frantic, but no less consuming. Every encounter left Maya more certain. She knew it was dangerous, knew it could end everything, yet she no longer cared. The pull was stronger than fear. But in the quiet moments, doubt returned. Lying awake at night, Maya wondered what would happen if her father found out. She wondered how long they could keep this hidden. She wondered if love could survive the weight of betrayal. Still, when Serena whispered her name, when her hands traced her skin, when her lips found hers in the shadows of the house, Maya silenced the doubts. In those moments, nothing else mattered. On the last night before Serena was scheduled to travel for work, they found themselves alone again. Daniel was away, the house quiet. They sat together in the living room, the glow of a single lamp casting soft light. Serena looked at her with eyes full of sorrow and fire. "I don't know what this will become," she admitted. but I know what I feel when I'm with you." Maya touched her face gently. "Then that's enough." They kissed again, long and lingering, as though trying to preserve the memory for the days apart. Their bodies pressed together, slow, deliberate, every touch memorized. When it ended, they held each other, silent, unwilling to release the fragile thread that bound them. Later, alone in her room, Maya opened the window. The night air was cool against her flushed skin. She closed her eyes, the taste of Serena's lips still fresh, the sound of her voice echoing. She knew life could never return to what it had been. She whispered into the dark, "I love you." And she knew that no matter how forbidden, no matter how fragile, the truth had already taken root. Nothing would ever be the same. Some stories don't end with clarity. They don't wrap themselves neatly with right and wrong, with love on one side and loyalty on the other. Instead, they linger, heavy, unresolved, forcing us to sit with the weight of choices that cannot be undone. Maya never planned for her heart to turn against her. She never asked to see her father's new partner as more than she should. Yet life rarely follows rules, and desire has its own language. From the very first glance in that library, she felt a pull she could not name. And by the time Serena's lips touched hers, by the time their bodies tangled in the silence of forbidden nights, it was already too late. For Serena, the conflict was sharper. She carried the burden of Daniel's trust, the promise of a future he believed in, while her heart betrayed her with every glance at his daughter. She tried to resist, tried to maintain distance, but the line blurred each time Maya's eyes searched hers, each time her hand lingered a second too long. Love does not ask permission. It does not wait for approval. It arrives, uninvited, relentless, and sometimes devastating. For Maya and Serena, it arrived like a storm, impossible to stop, reshaping everything in its path. They both knew what they risked. They knew that discovery would break Daniel, that the foundation of family itself could collapse. Yet in the darkness, they chose each other, if only for a night, if only for a moment. Because sometimes the human heart decides that even a fragment of forbidden love is worth more than a lifetime of emptiness. Perhaps their secret will remain hidden, carried only in whispers, in touches stolen when no one is looking. Perhaps one day the truth will emerge, and with it, consequences neither of them are ready to face. But what remains undeniable is this: something was born between them, something fierce, something fragile, something real. And that is where their story leaves us. Not with judgment, not with resolution, but with a question. How far would you go for love that feels impossible? Would you silence your heart to protect those you care for, or would you follow it into the fire, knowing you might lose everything? For Maya, the answer has already been written in the pages of her sketchbook, in the way her hands trace Serena's image again and again. For Serena, the answer hides in her whispered confession, "Your father loves you, and so do I." Two truths colliding. Two hearts, bound by both devotion and betrayal. A love that should never have happened, yet once awakened, could not be stopped. And maybe that is what makes this story unforgettable. Because behind the silence, behind the guilt, lies a reminder that love does not care for rules. It finds us where we least expect it, and once it takes hold, nothing will ever be the same again.